Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford, and I'm back today on my Patreon and Ko-Fi supported YouTube channel to discuss one of my least popular and almost certainly truest opinions, which is that the Vikings didn't have tattoos. Now let me present the counter argument first. I have a video where you can see a little bit more about this, but in the winter of 922 to 923, an Arabic-speaking traveler, Ahmad ibn Fadlan, went far to the north and around what is modern-day Kazan in Russia, encountered some people that he knew as the Rus. Now the Rus are at least a partially Norse people. This is a name given to Norse Vikings in Eastern Europe as well as their descendants. It's a little bit hard to know in the 920s if they would be more culturally Norse or more culturally Slavic, but I think we can fairly say that they are at least profoundly influenced by Norse culture, might even be Norse speaking. And there are details, as discussed in my longer video about this, of the funeral that he describes that are very like elements of funereal and afterlife traditions in the myths preserved in Scandinavia, both in, for example, the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda in Iceland and in Saxo's History of the Danes. So I think that Ibn Fadlan is a credible source. I mean, he's a medieval source. He's a medieval writer with a medieval man's prejudices. You know, he's never going to express perfect toleration of a different culture, but he seems pretty even-handed in the way that he talks about the different cultures he encounters. The work is actually quite interesting to read, and there's a new translation of it, newish translation of it, Penguin Classics. It's called Ibn Fadlan and the Land of Darkness, Arab Travelers in the Far North. So it actually features writers besides Ibn Fadlan. And this translation is by Paul Lundy and Caroline Stone. I have to rely on this. I don't know Arabic. My specialty is Old Norse itself, but I think we can rely on their translation. Now, sometimes enthusiasts for Norse things today express a dislike of Ibn Fadlan's account because they say, well, he seems so disgusted with the people that he describes. So either he's too negative, he's too partial, or, well, we're just not going to believe someone who talks us negatively about this culture. But I think that's a dangerous road to take. I mean, again, he's going to say things that are negative because he's a medieval man, and you got to take the good with the bad, because actually a lot of what he says about the Rus is extremely complimentary. So here's the part that gives rise, I think, to the notion that Vikings had tattoos. It is certainly the most credible evidence that Vikings had tattoos. Quoting from Lundy and Stone's translation. I saw the Rus who had come for trade and had camped by the river Itil. I have never seen bodies more perfect than theirs. See, again, he's positive. They were like palm trees. They are fair and ruddy. They wear neither coats nor caftans, but a garment which covers one side of the body and leaves one hand free. Each of them carries an axe, a sword, and a knife, and is never parted from any of the arms we have mentioned. By the way, I think this is also one of the sources for the notion, along with probably Half Stanza 38, that Norse pagans should always have weapons with them. Their swords are broad-bladed and grooved like the Frankish ones. Now here's the money quote. From the tips of his toes to his neck, each man is tattooed in dark green with designs and so forth. Okay, I don't dispute that the people that Ibn Fadlan encountered had tattoos then. But does that mean that tattooing was common in the Norse world back home in Scandinavia? Or is this a practice that the Rus have adopted either from the Slavic part of their heritage or from one of the numerous other peoples that they're encountering in Eastern Europe. I think probably the latter, and one of the best arguments for that is there's no Old Norse word for tattoo, nor does any Old Norse source describe tattooing. Get right back to that after a quick word from my kind friends and sponsors at Grimfrost. So there is no word in Old Norse that means tattoo. Never do we see anyone described as having designs on the skin that are plausibly interpretable as tattoos. I am confident in saying that. I will eat a hat if that's not true. I've read, pretty sure as surely as anyone has, read everything there is to read in Old Norse. Not to mention, in the modern Scandinavian languages, there's no native word for tattoo either. Right? So if this is something that was practiced in the Middle Ages and then into the early modern period, you would expect that maybe in Icelandic there would be a word for tattoo. There is a word for tattoo. It's tattoo, right? It's borrowed from the same Polynesian source as just about every other language's word for tattoo. And although Icelanders have traditionally loved coming up with their own words for things, and they do have their own word for tattoo, which is, you typically see as húðflúr. It's like skin decoration, hide ornamentation. It's not an old word. It's a word that was coined in the 20th century, maybe at best the late 19th century, but the earliest attestations I can find for it are early 20th. So there's no Old Norse word for this. If they were doing it, why don't they talk about it? Why don't other people besides Ibn Fadlan talk about it? I feel like when you read the sagas, they're so judgmental about people's appearance, giving people nicknames based on noticeable features of their appearance. You see guys named, Hesthovdi, a horse head, and like bad nose and things like that. Like, why isn't somebody named, Big Tattoo, right, or something like that? I really, really feel like it would come up because today when we describe people and they have lots of tattoos, it comes up, right? Oh hey, will you describe the individual that you're talking about? Yes, he is a guy with a lot of tattoos. It strikes me as a really prominent part of the description, right? Does he have any distinguishing marks, scars, tattoos, etc.? So I just really, really doubt it. Now, again, I think Ibn Fadlan is not lying. I think he encountered some Rus who had tattoos. They might have even been Norse-speaking Rus who had tattoos. Now, that can be influenced from another culture, as tattooing is in English-speaking culture, right? As witnessed by the fact that the word tattoo is a Polynesian word. It could also be that potentially tattooing was practiced by particular subcultures, right? I mean, it would be untrue to say that English-speaking culture in the 2020s is, like that everybody's tattooed or that everybody isn't tattooed. There's a lot of people who are and a lot of people aren't. But in certain subcultures, it's really common, right? Sailors often have tattoos, bikers often have tattoos, but I'm trying to think of a subculture that'd be particularly untattooed. I guess when I was younger, I would have probably said like church elders, but I actually think that's kind of less true now. Tattooing has definitely become more common. At any rate, there's certainly certain people who are going to do it, and certain people who aren't. And even if it were practiced in the Norse world, it's possible that it was something that was restricted to just one fairly minor subculture, and that's part of why we don't get these descriptions of it. And for what it's worth, if they did have tattoos, they would not have included things like Vegvisir, Eyjashjálmur, these magic sigils, which actually come from early modern manuscripts and are not Viking or pre-Christian in age. I have a lot of videos where I talk about these things and how they are wrongly attributed to the Viking age. So who knows what exactly they might have tattooed. Maybe a symbol that we actually do see in Viking age art, like the so-called Valknutur, not that we actually even know that's what they called it. Maybe runes. If they were runes, they'd be in Younger Fruthark, not Elder Fruthark. So I think almost certainly any tattoos that purport to be quote-unquote Viking, quote-unquote, pre-Christian, pagan, Norse, Scandinavian, whatever, are ahistorical. That doesn't mean that you can't have them. Obviously, I'm the opposite of a fashion influencer. Although I hear cowboy core or whatever is kind of hot right now. Is it a coincidence that I've been wearing a cowboy hat for, more than 30 years and people are catching on now? I don't know. But no, I'm not much of a fashion influencer, so, do what you want. You can say, well, Crawford's an old grumpy man who hates tattoos, and I mean, it's kind of true. I am an old grumpy man, and tattoos are not my thing, but whatever, maybe they're yours. But I don't think Vikings had them. I don't think that you can claim a pre-Christian Norse provenance for any tattoo design or for the practice of tattooing in general. And I think it's ahistorical to depict Vikings with them, or certainly the Norse gods with them. And if you disagree with me, I think you're wrong. But I think that you can have whatever taste you want to have. It's a big world. Anyway, well, thank you, folks. Appreciate the support of those of you on Patreon, Ko-Fi, those of you buying my books, taking the Old Norse class, etc. And from beautiful Colorado, Birds and I are wishing you all the best.